once again to Life That Matters with Dr. Sharon Norris Elliott. It's a really good thing that this program is entitled that because guess what? I'm Dr. Sharon Norris Elliott. Welcome once again. If you are a regular audience member, thank you for being here. If this is your first time watching, welcome. Here at Life That Matters, we talk about the Word of God. We talk about books that people have written. We talk about ministries. We talk about lives that are significant in the sight of Christ. Your life is significant and your life matters. Today, I have the pleasure of being with one of my author friends, and we are also a part of an organization known as AWSA, AWSA, Advanced Writers and Speakers Association. And Deb has written a book that goes along with my new sub episode titles, which is Sixty-Sational. We are talking about women who have continued to thrive and live and just do their thing, right? After age 50 and 60, right? We are sixty-sational. And so Deb is going to be actually one of our first guests. We had another guest not too long ago in studio. This time, Deb is coming in from her home. And Deb, I want to welcome you and thank you for being here.
Sharon, thanks so much. I have been looking forward to seeing you and to talking together with you about a topic that I think is near and dear to both of us.
Right. We have been hitting and missing at um, Deb being available when I'm shooting, and then me being available when she's not, and all of these things. So finally, we've come together. Hallelujah. Okay. So Deb, why don't you tell us a little bit about just yourself and your ministry to begin with before we get into the book?
Sure. I've been writing for 10 years, Sharon, and it was nothing I ever aspired to do. God surprised me and tapped me on the shoulder after having three people who said to me for years, you should be writing. I had no idea what they were talking about. But the good news is I finally sat up, paid attention, and I've been writing mostly in the last 10 years on marriage and family.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Conflict in marriage and all of the kinds of things that can be challenging for us, in-law relationships and so on. That
Right.
took a turn about 2 years ago, and I wrote just a fun book that was a devotional based on bumper stickers, of all things. And um, but the title for this book, We May Be Done, But We're Not Finished, Making the Rest of Your Life the Best of Your Life, was a title that came to me years ago, and it wouldn't leave me alone.
Hmm.
So I figured it was probably time to do something with it since God kept bringing it back. And I'll tell you the response to it from women who have perhaps not been as out front with the desire to thrive and survive and live big, as you said.
Mm-hmm.
Um, they said, "Thank you. This is the encouragement I needed." So it's been fun, and it's been really rewarding. And I got to work with 23 authors I didn't know.
That's awesome. So here's the book. We may be done, but we're not finished. Okay, we may be done, but we're not finished. And so pick a copy up. This is published by Elk Lake Publishing. It's available everywhere. Books are sold. You can go on the internet, of course. So our conversation today, to start with, I would like to know. You just told us that God put the title and all that on your heart, but can you give us a little bit more about why you wanted to write this book?
Sure. When I hit my mid 50s, I was still very much running a business that I loved, and I was working with a group of individuals that at a major corporation. Every week in a different town, we were doing an activity. and they had to pick the survivors of
Hmm.
out of a group of people that had been stranded on an island, and there were brief descriptions. And what I came to understand as the men worked through, as all men worked through this puzzle together, they had a list of, I think, 8 people,
Mm-hmm.
very brief descriptions. And individually, they had to pick the ones that they thought should be rescued because they could only take 5 of the 8 on the island. The
Hmm.
other 3 would remain behind, and the storm coming in meant they probably would not survive. Here's what I learned. The woman who was described as 55-year-old housewife, mom, high school education, well, she was going to be a floater every single time, Sharon. And
Wow.
the rationale is fascinating. It's like, hey, she's 55. What else does she have to do? She's raised her kids. She's done what she was put here to do. Or she's middle life. I mean, what she got left to do? Die?
Hmm.
And it just struck me, I wanted to strike them on occasion because it was
Wow.
so blatant. And then my sister in law, who at 55 discovered that she was going to be building a new life for herself, kept being interviewed for jobs and not getting them. And
Hmm.
we had our suspicions that it could have been age. But I also had someone say to me, well, I can't find a good reason not to bring you in to do the work. I was just hoping for someone younger. Those were the 2 firing points for me that said,
Mm-hmm.
okay, this is ridiculous.
Right.
And began to talk to other women who were having very similar experiences.
Hmm. Well, I'm glad you have written the book and you have put stories in here that are going to encourage us. So we're going to get into the stories later, probably on our next show. You're going to be with me for 2 shows, so because we have so much to talk about on this topic. So let's get into your definition of the word prime right at the beginning of the book, actually, in your introduction.
Yep,
You talk about the word prime,
yep.
and I thought that was very interesting and important.
Well,
Why don't you go ahead and tell us?
we talk about the prime of life, and sometimes
Yes.
it's used in a bad way, like she was cut down in the prime of her life. Um, but when I looked at the word itself, and I'm going to just, if it's all right with you, I'm going to read it because
Oh,
it's
yes.
it's so specific, and it says that the word prime is an adjective, a noun, and a verb, and I like that because it means it's multifaceted. It's not locked down into a single spot.
Mm-hmm.
And it means adaptable and flexible and able to reinvent, repurpose, and rearrange. Isn't that what life after 50 is like, Sharon?
That is exactly what, but see, those men who wanted to get rid of us or
Right.
leave us on the island to drown,
Right.
right? Basically didn't realize, right, that that's what wives and moms, right? That's what we're doing all along.
Absolutely.
And it just seems as though all our whole lives we're really practicing for the 60-sational years,
I, I,
right?
I would so agree with that. I think that, we've there comes that day when we look across the table at breakfast at the man sitting on the other side, and we haven't called him anything except dad for years, but the kids have been long gone now.
Right.
It's like, who are you and what's your name? Because I haven't called you anything except that for years. And I
Hmm.
think, Sharon, what happens for an awful lot of us is that we're so focused on bringing those youngsters up and getting them on their way that we fail to steward maybe our marriage. We fail to steward friendships sometimes. And a lot of women said, I worked, but it was a
Hmm.
job. It was not a career. It was what was necessary to help the household operate. And so
Hmm.
they have a long list of to dos, and the list
Hmm.
is 20.
Right, right. I was really fortunate, I believe, that, and I want to talk to the 20 and 30 somethings from the point of view of a 60-sational. um, at, in your 20s and 30s, remember that you will be 50 and 60 one of these days. And the planning to get there and the decisions that you make in your 20s and your 30s make a difference. I was very, very fortunate in that I believe I was forward thinking. I always wanted to be home, for example, with my children when my children were young. And I had to rethink the idea of being home with them or being with them. And
Mhm.
being with them was the actual important thing. And so my career as a school teacher meant that taught, I, by choice, I taught at a school where my children could go. And so I was technically with them,
Yeah.
right? As they grew up, just a small portion of time, actually, while they were in middle school, I wasn't with them. And that's because you couldn't teach me enough to teach in middle school. But that's a whole different subject.
Yep.
So I taught in a school that had an elementary and middle school and preschool.
Oh,
And so while I was teaching my classes, my boys were in their classes. And then, like I said, for some of later elementary and for middle school, they were away from me. And then in high school, I transferred over and started teaching high school, and
wow.
they were in high school with me. So um, thinking forward
Yeah.
as to all that you want, you may not be able to have it all at the same time. You can have it all, but you may not be able to have it all at the same time. And then once we get to be Sixty-Sational, right? Our 50s, our 60s, we realize how multifaceted. I love that word, Deb. Multifaceted. We really are. Did you have something else you wanted to add to that prime idea?
It talks. I talked a little bit about how the word is used. We talk about of prime importance. That means it's at the top of the list. It's of
Mhm.
first importance. We talk about a great steak. What is it called? It's prime beef. It
That's right.
means that there's significance and there's purpose and there's value and there's all of those good things. And I really do believe after spending the last year talking with so many women who are sixty-sational like you and I, and some a little over, and some. My oldest writer was in her mid 80s, believe it or not, and the
Right.
youngest writer was just 56. So it was a good
Hmm.
spread. But I think a lot of them really have believed that lie that says, you know, the
Now, I hope
best.
let me stop you for a moment. I hope our audience is hearing you clearly. I missed a couple of things in your last comment. And so go back to the prime beef. I don't want anyone to miss that.
Okay. We talk about we talk about the prime of life, and prime is used to describe one of the most important things, and it's part of our life. But a lot of women don't know
Yes.
that, and they don't believe.
Yes.
I think the best has come and gone.
And it's hilarious. I have the two boys I just talked about, Matthew and Mark. Matthew's the oldest, and Matthew has started to send me cards. I mean, they've sent me cards for Mother's Day and birthday and things like that. But in his cards lately, he has been adding, and Mom, I am so proud of what you are doing during your golden years.
He was funny until he got to the golden years remark.
Yes, I'm in the golden years. So I'm going to start telling him these are the prime years. Let's switch that to prime years. Okay, so let's switch a little bit. We're still in the introduction of this great book. I don't want you all to miss this book. We May Be Done. but we're not finished. Okay, Deb DeArmond. So, still in the intro, let's talk about um, the questions that you give us, Deb, to help us on our path. All right. So you have written here at this prime stage in life, we still need to prepare. The challenge is many of us are unclear about what to prepare for. Here are a few questions to help you set on your path. So, um, here's what I'd like for us to do. I'm going to give you the question, kind of, Deb, talk about that question, and then I wanted to give you an example
Good.
using me. Okay,
We'll tag team.
because it was so fun to read these questions and realize, okay, like I've done my homework. So question number one is, what do I know?
Well, what do I know is all about reflection. Where have I been? What were my experiences? Who did I learn from? What were the hard lessons I learned that I want to avoid? And what were some of the things that I thought to myself, boy, I'd like to do that someday. So, what do you know, Sharon?
Okay, so sitting back, I just retired a year ago from full time teaching, 35 years of teaching. Yay! Uh, and so I know that. But what I did for 30 of those 35 years on the side was right.
Mm,
And I built a writing ministry and speaking ministry and a teaching ministry to writers. All right. So I knew I could sit back and say, okay, I know that I have the gift of teaching.
yep, yep,
And I taught kids in my, like, my people were high school people, right? So now what could I do with what I know to be my gift, right?
right,
And what could I do now in my golden years? No, in my prime years, right? What could I do now that related to that? So what I know is teaching.
okay. And so, when you think about the crafts and the skills that you've gathered, what could I use to benefit others? Frankly, I think one of the mandates for us as believers is to pay it forward. I had so many people who did that for me. And in fact, the 23 authors that wrote with me, most of them had not been published before.
Hmm.
I wanted to be that helping hand to give them that first start. So, Sharon, how can you use what you know to benefit others?
So that's question number two. How can I use what I know to benefit others? So I know how to teach and I know how to write because now I've been in this publishing business for 30 years. And so I can marry those two things together and teach people how to write.
There you go. There's,
Wow, ba-ba. Okay.
so
So
because
now, yeah, question number three.
yeah, we're lifelong learners. If we're going to thrive at every stage of life, we have to continue to learn. And so the question about what do I want to learn, we have to be specific because if you aim for nothing, well, you hit nothing. What do you
Right.
want to learn in order? What do you have to do? What do you want to learn in order to do that? Teaching others to write well. What do you need to learn?
Okay, so it just so happened that August 2020, when I retired, we were at the main start of the pandemic.
Yep.
So I have always taught in person. And so what I needed to learn then was, okay, how am I going to, here's the buzzword, right, of 2021, pivot, right? How am I going to pivot um, into teaching online?
Yeah.
And so let me learn what I need to know about that, the different platforms, Zoom and Crowdcast and whatever is out there, that I am going to be able to use to get my message across to people who need what I have. So
Absolutely.
not only do I need to learn those platforms, but the other thing I need to learn is how to contact that audience,
Yep.
right? How to get that audience to know what I'm doing.
Absolutely. And I even had people say, I want to learn some things that I didn't know before. I want to learn how to watercolor paint, or I want to learn how to dance. We've got a gal in the book that at 61, she was in a dance recital. And she said, I always wanted to be a dancer and I'm never going to be any good, but I had the time of my life. It was fun.
Right.
So a lot of us put off doing things until the nest is empty and the kids are through school and on their way. And for a lot of us, it meant we deferred some of the things we wanted to do. So what have you put off doing that now might be the right time?
Okay, so question 4, what have I put off doing? What I've put off doing is going into this writing and speaking and all of teaching full time
Mhm.
for myself. There are many, many people now who are starting their own businesses. And I've I was already in business only part-time, doing what I'm doing now. I started my Authorized Me business, for example, the consulting and editing and coaching side in 2008, right? But now I've put off doing it full time.
Yeah. Yeah.
But like you are saying, there are other things that people have put off because I just didn't have the time,
Right.
right, to do those things. I know one of the fun things is I've put off, because everybody was working, just having fun lunches with my girlfriends.
Yep.
Now that we're all becoming Sixty-Sational, all right, we have that time and we're going to start putting that into practice. But for me, putting off uh, going full time,
Yep. And it's
right?
overwhelming when you do that. It takes it from being hobbyist to being a business, a full-time
Yes.
business, and it has a different kind of demands. That fifth question is not really a question, it's a direction. It's okay, now that you've answered those questions, sit quietly and soak up God, because
Hmm.
when we present ourselves with open hearts, open minds, and not saying, that's not what I do, but I've never done that before, but I don't think I can do that. Um, he's able to get a word in edgewise and remind
Hmm.
us that we're God's kids and that whatever he calls us to do, he'll empower us to do. He never walks out on a check. He always pays the bill. That's how it works. So is that a practice that you find is helpful too, to just kind of remove yourself from the noise and the hoopla and sit with him for a while, Sharon?
Yeah, Deb, I think I am probably on the other side of that spectrum. I know there are people who, want to wait and really question,
Yeah.
a lot about the next step and is this what I should do? And that is cool, right? If that is the way that you are built, sitting and soaking, but then moving, is important. I kind of fall on the other side. I have an idea and I'm like, let's go. Right. So I tend to just almost recklessly, maybe
Yeah.
step on out or step through. I always like to say I go through doors God opens. And I just trust him. If he's opened the door, then there must be something grand,
Yeah. Yeah.
and glorious on the other side. And it's, to me, I don't want to miss that. And so he has come through for me in that way so many times, over and over and over again. Starting full time with Authorized Me, and now I'm also a literary agent. So I'm not only able to help you write your book, but I'm also able to get your foot in the door
It's great.
with a publisher.
Yeah.
And now I have these grand ideas about, okay, so now that you have a contract and your book's about to come out, here's some other ideas of ways to market. and really get the I know that's not my job as a literary agent, but I think that's my job just as a leader of my clients, and going the whole nine. I like to say from idea to manuscript to masterpiece and now to marketing, right?
Yeah.
We're going to have to add that on. So sitting and soaking and listening to what God says, but then going on, ladies, and move on it. You know, some people, well, suppose I fail. Okay,
Thank you.
right?
It's one
You
way
know,
not to do it. So
you know the old saying, right? Nothing beats a failure but a try,
that's right.
right?
And when you run up against something where you fail, you can at least check that off as a methodology to go forward. You've eliminated
Exactly.
one bad idea.
Exactly. And so, believe it or not, Deb, we are coming to the end
I know
of the
we are.
first program. What? Okay. So, you see, we are not even finished with talking about how we may be done, but we're not finished, right? Literally, we're not finished. And so, we're going to continue to talk about not only this book, but the concept of continuing to move forward in God,
Mhm.
no matter whether you are 50, 60, 60-sational, as I have been saying, or more. So when you come back to the next episode, be ready to hear some of the great stories that are in this book and hear more encouragement. So, you have been listening to Deb DeArmond today, her wonderful book, We May Be Done, but We're Not Finished. And I'm Dr. Sharon Norris Elliott. This is Life That Matters. Your life matters. Sixty-Sational. See you.